Well, hey y'all, happy Monday. Well, welcome back. So, it's about time. Well, it's time. It's time. It's time to plant in my bales. And I know I've done a video before where I talked about the bales and how we get the bales together and the bales are ready. So I'll give you a quick rundown of how we get the bales ready, because a lot of people wonder, can you just plant in a bale? And no, there is a little bit of a process, because what we're doing essentially with the bale is we're forcing it to go into rapid composting, and then we're bringing it back down to a cooler temperature so that we can plant in it. So I'm going to give you a little roundup of what that's like. Then I'm actually going to show you how I plant a transplant and how I plant seeds into the bale. And then that way, if you are interested in planting in bales, you'll know that after a full year of a summer and winter cycle, my bales have really done great in the yard, and they really don't require as much water as I was told that they needed. I definitely don't think that they need any more water than my bags do, any of the containers that I water on a daily basis. So if you're limited on space, or you have an all rock backyard and you don't necessarily want to take your rocks out, you can do straw bales on absolutely any surface. And that's the biggest reason why the author of the book The Straw Bale Garden, Joel Carlston, that's why he got into doing straw bales, is because where he was at, the ground was really hard, and he just felt that it was going to be really hard to tackle in terms of setting up a garden. And he had watched throughout his childhood straw bales outside of the barn in the area where he grew up, that the weeds and the flowers always grew happiest on those bales because they were basically just little stacks of compost. So thus the idea. Okay, so the way that we go about making the bales ready to plant in is by forcing nitrogen into the bales. So you can do this in two ways, organically or non-organically. So a non-organic way to do it would be to just use your typical lawn fertilizer that you throw out on your lawn. Organic ways that you could do it would be like with blood meal or bone meal, or with a product called Mill Organite. That's what we use, and it's not that easy to find in the valley. We've mostly found it at True Value hardware stores. So it's like a recycled sludge from Wisconsin, I believe, but it's really effective, and it's a little bit faster than the route with the blood meal and the bone meal. Okay, so what you do is over the course of, I think it's about, over the course of like 7 days, well, really 9. Over the course of 9 days, you apply fertilizer, this nitrogen fertilizer. So it's every other day. So on the first day, you do, if it's the lawn fertilizer, you do 1 cup, and if it's an organic fertilizer, you do 3 cups. So you put however your amount is on the bale, and you water it in. And it's best to water it in with warm water, because that's what you're trying to do, is warm up the bale. So on the second day, you just do water, and you're really only doing about a gallon of water. And that's what was one of the reasons why one of our bales in our original straw bale garden diminished sharply on one side, is because we were kind of over watering them, because we thought that we needed to work harder to get that nitrogen in there. And you don't. You really only need, and what we would do is we'd set out our 2-gallon water container out on the pool deck, let it get warm, and that's what we'd use to water. So every other day for 5 days, you do the water and the nitrogen fertilizer. And then on like the 6th, 7th, and 8th day, you do half of the amount of nitrogen, but you do it each day, and you water it in. And then on like the 9th day or the 10th day, and I might be getting a little bit off, you go in and you water in a 10-10 fertilizer. And from there, you just kind of let it go. You let it hang out. Now, when we originally did this over here in the center of the yard, the temperatures were a lot warmer. It was at the end of March. I got a lot of sun, and it took a good week or two to actually cool down. And cool down, I mean that the temperatures of the bale at one point were up to 120 degrees, and that's even keeping them moist. And so you really want to be planting at like 95 or below to keep from frying your plants. So because these bales have been over here in the shade, they haven't really gotten super hot. They've gotten up to 77 a couple, and on the times that I checked it. I didn't check it every single day, but there were a couple times, because at that midweek cycle, midpoint in the cycle, like the 7-8 day, that's the time that you should really feel the bales warming up in some way. If you stuck your fingers in there, you could feel the warmth. Or, you know, I've got my little temperature gun, so that's how I tested the temperature. So I do know at that midpoint that the bales were getting as warm as the raised bed, which gets the most sun in all of the yard. So now so if you're doing it organically, after about the 12th day, you can go ahead and start to plant. But when you're doing it organically, I think it usually takes longer for it to cool down. And so then you want to wait another 5 days. So all of that has expired for me, and it's time to plant in the bale. Now, there's 2 ways of doing that. I'll show you that. And I'll say that the only thing I've done otherwise is, from all the nitrogen that you put on top, it kind of leaves a little bit of a layer. So I've sprayed all of that back and off of the bale as best as I can. And so the next step is just to go start sticking my plants in. So let's check it out. Now the bales are super loose compared to how they were when we first got them. So the neat thing is that you can just go in here, and so I've just got this tool that I like using, and you could use just a regular spade to do this also. So I'm just going to open up a space in the bale like that, and I'm going to keep my tool right there, and then I'm going to pull back with the tool again, stick my hand in there, and then I'm just going to slide this tomato plant down in that hole that I've created. So all you have to do when you're done is just kind of tuck it back together like so. And we've got that one planted. So now we're going to come down here and we're going to put another one of these in. And I'm just going to open up a spot in the bale, get it opened up nice and wide. I don't think I got the last one opened up as wide as I'd like for it to be. And I'm gonna take one of these plants here, and I'm just gonna get open back up, and I'm gonna stick it down in there as deep as I can. I'm covering all my roots, and I'm gonna mash it back together like so. Now, if you had a transplant from the nursery, you could just go in with your blade and cut out a square the size that you need and plant your plant in it, and it'll just take off. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is seeds. For itty bitty seeds, you can always go along and take this is castings, but you could take compost. You don't want to take dirt out of your yard because it could have the potential to have weeds. So you could use compost. Like I said, this is just some worm castings, and I'm just going to make a little pile of dirt right here. Now, if you had a lot to do, you could cover a lot of the bale, but we're just going to, for example, now I really only do this now for small seeds. So for something as small as a watermelon seed, now I feel just as fine sticking this in because I know it will do fine. But for smaller seeds, you can always tuck it in with a little bit of compost, and as you water it, the compost or the castings or your garden soil, not from the garden but from like a bag, will keep that in place, and then it'll root down into the bale. Now with a larger seed like this spaghetti squash, I had fine success just poking a space down into the bale and sticking the seed in there. And I'm just going to stick it as far as my finger goes and then mash it back together. And what's even more cool is that you can come down and even plant into the sides of the bale. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to tuck in a spot right here. I'm going to wiggle my little finger in there. It's a little bit tighter. I didn't run off with my tool. Yeah, I did. So I'm going to poke my finger in here, and then I'm going to poke this little seed in here, and I'm going to mash the pieces back together, and that's going to keep that seed in there. So now I've got a watermelon here, and I've got a watermelon here, and over here I've got a spaghetti squash. So we'll just water this the same way that we do our garden when we're trying to get our seeds to come up. And this thing is so full of nitrogen and so full of fertilizer that it is just going to go crazy overnight. So that is how simple it is to plant in a straw bale. It's really incredibly easy, and I hope that this encourages you to give it a try. And so one of these bales, because we live here in the valley, it's like $9. So that's kind of your investment, is a $9 bale. Whatever you're going to use for nitrogen, whatever fertilizer you've got around that's already a 10-10. And then once it cools down, you just start treating it like a garden, and that's it. All right. Well, I hope you found that pretty interesting and perhaps encouraging enough to consider starting your own straw bale garden. And I would say that you probably do still have time, especially if your intention was to plant mostly transplants in it. So if you'd like to try it out, hurry, scurry down to the stock shop if you're anywhere near Glendale, and maybe the Tractor Supply if you're not. Get straw bales and get going on your process to your own straw bale garden. Have the best day ever.